Absolutely. Thank you. Hey everyone, welcome to Dark Fantasy and Science Fiction Readings panel featuring speculative authors who will be reading their stories featured in Futuristic Canada or Dark Helix Ezine. Each reader will have 6 minutes to read the passage of their choosing. And if we have time, we'll do a Q&A right after. So let's get started. The first reader is going to be Jen Frankel. Jen is the author of the Blood and Magic series about young heroine Maggie Stewart. Her podcast, Jen Frankel Reads Random Shit, is a great resource for all writers. Jen is also an avid screenwriter and an award-winning poet, as well as a great lover of fish, birds, cats, and all other living creatures. She even has a soft spot for human beings, provided they behave at least as well as their pets. Everyone, please welcome Jen Frankel.
Hello. Oh, that was a fun, I forgot that bio. I like that one. Hi, everybody. My name's Jen Frankel. I'm going to read the entirety of my piece that's in Futuristic Canada because it clocks in at just like 15 seconds over 6 minutes if I read it slowly. So I'm hoping that I can get it all in. This is called Lingua Franca, and it's set in a post-insurrection world where the United States has basically taken over all of North America except for Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. And that's our joined country of Frank Canada. Conditional release from defection housing on the condition of this, a live streaming interview with a Frank Canadian talk show host. Thank God they're letting me do this in American. Sorry. Oh, right. The defection itself. Me, I move in the middle of on samedi après-midi à la Grande Jatte. I was playing Helena, the feisty yet vulnerable whore. I'm sorry, prostitute. I sometimes forget where I am. Can you bleep that? Great. Big toothy grin, genuine as possible for the camera. Of course, no more swearing. I'd hate to make your censors stay late because of my American potty mouth. Oh, they're unionized. Lucky them, but even worse for you if I let my PC slip and they end up scoring overtime on your dime. Yes, middle of La Grande Jatte, and I was playing the woman of après-midi. Does that work for you? God, I love the euphemisms politeness forces you to. Can I say God? Okay, I promise the next time it will be in a properly sacred context and not used as a swear. When did I decide? Well, that's hard to answer and also kind of obvious. Have you seen where I come from? The US of NA. I know all the funny things Frank Canadian comedians come up with to recoin the acronym. Unkind sons of nasty Aryans, useless scoundrels of national abomination. Okay, yeah, I just came up with that last one, and I know it's not good. But I'm a serious actress, not a stand-up comic. No one goes into stand-up over the border anymore anyhow. You know that too, right? Inciting political unrest is a capital offense. And I know comedians are always joking about dying on stage, but yeah, exactly. Dying off stage is forever. Pour toujours. Did I get that right? Smiles again, pretends not to notice a slightly superior downturn of the host nose. Yeah, buddy, I'm trying. I really am. So, yeah, I made a dash into the audience right in the middle of the second act, thinking of Baryshnikov and that he'd have been a hell of a lot more graceful. Made it to the lobby, which counts as Frank Canadian soil, as you know. You've seen it thanks to the socialized media. Yeah, that's probably a joke I should have left back across the border. But it's set in love. It really is. I love everything socialized here. The medicine, the unemployment benefits, the legal representation if you get into trouble. Not to mention the rehabilitation classes. I'm about halfway through the Franco-Canadian history course, in fact, and I can tell you what North Americans know is nothing like the truth. Not seriously, because this stuff just got real. I'm censoring my own thoughts now. But adoption requires adjustment for both the adoptee and the new parents, and I am not going back to the States. No way. Oh, language courses too. You know, we did Sam Day and Frank Canadian, right? I had to learn the whole thing, syllable by syllable phonetically, but it was such a great experience. It really taught me to love the amazing synthesis of, well, you know, how two disparate cultures can come together and thrive. It's the frank Canadian way, right? Pause, because I'm actually getting applause on this turkey of a suck-up line. Big sigh, but keep it inside. I do really love this place, and it's not just because I hate where I came from so much. Sorry. No, no, you're not boring me. I guess I'm just somewhat still traumatized. Although I know I'm one of the lucky ones. I met a young man at the Department of Infection Services when I was doing my intake examination. He'd come up from Mexico State, and he was a mess. He walked about 400 miles on a pair of last century's Air Jordans, and they had him up to his knees in ice. His story, oh my, not God, don't say God. Oh my word, it was tragic. He'd been sent to the camps after the Hispanic insurrection and hadn't seen or talked to his family since. He was only 17. How does anyone do that to a kid? And I know he's hardly the youngest who fled from separation and cultural reassignment. How do you like that for a euphemism? Serve. Well, I hope there's some kind of frank Canadian version of the USO where I can put my talents to use. I can dance in a chorus line, but don't expect me to shoot straight. No, of course I don't mean that. I know what it means to serve your country or your, you know, adopted country in my case. And of course I would serve if I was drafted. It frightens me, and I'm not too proud to admit it, but when I think about the US of NA forces marshaling on the Ontario and New Brunswick borders, not to mention across the river in Maine and Vermont, I do pray that our eastern border holds firm. Now, those Newfies are tough. No plans to get back on the stage. Not yet. I mean, doing the last show in Frank Canadian was pretty demanding. And I feel that as a monolingual American-speaking actress, it really is my job to get the language down before I take jobs away from native speakers. Thank you. I'm trying. After all, being polite is the frank Canadian way. I hope it doesn't get you all killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. That was wonderful. And on to the next one. Next reader is Helen Power. Helen is a librarian, writer, and fridge magnet connoisseur living in Saskatoon. In her spare time, she haunts deserted cemeteries, loses her heart to dashing thieves, and cracks stuffed cases, all from the comfort of her writing nook. Her debut novel, The Ghost of Thorwald Place, is coming October 2021 with Camcat Books. Helen Power, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be reading from my short story in Futuristic Canada, The Night Librarian. And I'm just going to be starting from the beginning. I was trying to find the best spot, and I realized that with the world building, I have to start from the beginning. Okay. All right. The words were scrawled in block letters on the sleek metal washroom stall door. Have a nice day, followed by a drooping smiley face. I rolled my eyes at the overly polite graffiti. Only in Canada, I muttered as I inspected the ink. It looked permanent. All the history books said Canadians were significantly friendlier than those from other countries. I would never know for sure because all the other countries and the people living in them were long gone. Everything was destroyed by the great cataclysm of 2067, but I had read a lot of books written before the world ended, and I knew that if I had been working in a library anywhere else, the vandalism would have been a lot less well-mannered. I reached into the janitor's toolkit and retrieved the eraser, a small handheld device that could theoretically erase everything. I supposed I would be putting it to the test. As a librarian, cleaning the washrooms went far beyond my job description, but the night janitor hadn't shown up, so I was the only person working that night. Surprisingly, the graffiti came off easily. The eraser sliced through the ink with exact and startling precision. Finished with my menial task, I returned the janitor's toolbox to the nearest utility closet. I hurried down the aisles of bookcases, eager to get out of the basement level. Every shelf was overflowing with boxes of microfilm that we still hadn't earned the funding to digitize, a wealth of historical information trapped in an obsolete format. I stepped into the elevator pod. With a quiet whir, it deposited me on the ground floor. I exited and strode down the empty halls, the sound of my heels clacking against the polished marble, which echoed across the high ceilings. The National Library, the nation's only library, was designed by Clara Dufont, New Canada's most preeminent architect of the 21st century, who had evolved the Beaux-Arts style of architecture to incorporate contemporary technology. I settled into my chair at the circulation desk and slipped on a pair of well-worn protective gloves. I opened the antique book I was reading, careful not to crack the spine. This was the world's last copy of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and I would not be responsible for damaging such a valuable and rare piece of Canadian literature. My name was Charlotte Babineau, and I was the night librarian at the National Library. It was my responsibility to collect, preserve, share, and protect information from before and after the Great Cataclysm of 2067. This included the plethora of information that was once on the internet, which was now stored in the sleek servers situated in the lower levels of the building. The library housed everything, from priceless art to the government's most top secret reports and documents. These mostly comprised of the architect's blueprints for our country and the climate scientist's annual environmental scans, all of which were stored in a highly secure vault in the basement. Not even I had access to it. When I graduated from the university with a degree in library and information science, I was surprised to discover that in order to be a librarian, I also had to undergo vigorous physical training so I could protect the library's secrets. I was instructed in karate, taekwondo, and meditation. The latter was more for my nerves than anything else. In addition to the government's most well-guarded secrets, the library was home to a great number of print books. Because not everything could be saved, preference had to be given to Canadian literature. I had been slowly working my way through the classics on these cold, desolate winter nights. While the library was technically open 24 hours a day, I rarely saw patrons who were interested in research or finding their next favorite read during the dead of the night. I used to work with another librarian, but due to cutbacks, I had to hold down the fort alone from 11 to 7, when most of New Canada was tucked away in their warm beds. I didn't mind the solitude since it gave me the opportunity to brush up on old Canadian literature. An alert sounded from my Appel, a communications device that was small enough to fit into the palm of my hand, but loud enough to echo across the loud, empty halls. Sighing, I glanced over at its screen. It was a news alert, but not just any kind of news alert. It was a crime news alert. That couldn't be right. Appel, read the headline, I commanded. Woman found murdered with half-digested poutine in her stomach. A chill crept down my spine. Statistically, there was an average of 3 murders a year in New Canada. We'd already reached 2 and it was only February. A few weeks earlier, Dr. Jia Chen had been run over by a hijacked Zamboni. Appel, show me the article. My voice shook slightly. Former burlesque dancer and current janitor at the National Library, Lisette Boujard, found dead on the corner of Wellington and Elgin at 11 p.m. today. Guilt washed over me. I'd been wishing her dead as I scrubbed the toilets, and she hadn't shown up to work because she already was dead. An autopsy scan has revealed that the 42-year-old was shot in the head point blank. Partially digested poutine from Trudeau's treats was detected in her digestive tract, indicating that she had consumed it nearly 30 minutes before her death. Detective Lyons assured the Canadian Sun that there is no cause for alarm and that this was likely a one-time crime before returning to his box of Timbits. Their article didn't have enough information. How was Lisette shot? There were hardly any pistolets in New Canada. All pistolets were registered and a ballistic scan would have quickly identified the killer. Why wasn't that information included in the news alert? And usually when there was a murder in New Canada, the Prime Minister made a statement. Although Prime Minister Mary Beth Warren hadn't been well lately, she was pushing 90 and currently up for her 9th term. She'd won the last 8 elections by a landslide and had led New Canada into peaceful times for 32 years. But this past election, she'd had a real contender, Arthur Crouch of the Freedom Party. Crouch had gained popularity with the younger crowd by appealing to their distrust of science. I glanced around, paranoia rising with all the little hairs on my arms. The library was quiet, too quiet. All right, I have to stop here. I think that was about 6 minutes, right?
Just a bit under, 5:48. Okay, thank you. Next reader is Andrew Jensen. Andrew Jensen lives in Braeside, Ontario. He is a United Church minister and Kermit the Frog impersonator who has played trumpet with a semi-pro jazz band. He's a regular in local musical theater productions Andrew's most recent stories are published in Dreamforge magazine, Swords and Sorcery magazine, Abyss and Apex magazine, and the anthology Tales from the Fluffy Bunny. You can find him at LinkedIn. Andrew Jensen, go ahead.
Hi, I'll Kermit the Frog here. Sorry, I just had to do that. I apologize for the lack of picture. I haven't really had a chance to figure out what's wrong. I'm going to be reading from my story, Here Comes Santa Claus, which was one of the 2 stories I have in Futuristic Canada. Spoiler alert, I'm reading the very ending of it. This takes place in a small Ontario town late in the 21st century after there has been a pandemic and a massive global warming effect. The town is impoverished that this takes place in, and it actually is a town where church elders have replaced the town council. And the person that is the star of the show, as it were, David Stewart, is a young theologian who wants to figure out how the people are living with their faith in this very repressed little community. To his great surprise, after a bit of a misunderstanding, he's asked to play Santa Claus in the Santa Claus parade, which he certainly didn't expect. Partway through the parade, things start to go a little badly, and this is where we take up the story. The extra speed didn't last long. Santa David's way was blocked by a crowd of adults. Leading them was the chief elder, Henry Van Erp. He was dressed in the black robes and long preaching tabs of a 19th century Presbyterian minister. While someone held the horse's bridle, Van Erp climbed up into the wagon, carrying a heavy pulpit Bible, and stood next to the seated Santa. Santa Claus has come into our midst, Van Erp intoned. What does he bring? Empty gifts, shouted the crowd. Ho, 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 retorted David. The angry looks from the crowd made him wish he hadn't. What does Santa bring? Repeated Van Erp. Empty promises, the shout was louder. Is Santa good? Continued the robed elder. No, no, no. Is Santa holy? No, no, no. What does Santa bring to our Savior's birth? Mockery, mockery. The shout was deafening. What does Santa teach us? Greed, greed. David was no longer fascinated with this litany. The roar of the crowd was beginning to sound dangerous. What does Santa bring us? Sin, sin. What do we need instead? Food, food. David was surprised at this non-spiritual answer. Then food you shall have. Van Erp gestured at the horse, and David heard it scream in pain. Someone had expertly cut open the animal's throat, and its blood quickly pumped out onto the road. The horse's scream snapped the fascination that had held David spellbound. He started up out of the wagon seat, a cry of outrage on his lips. Before he could utter anything coherent, his shout was cut off by the weight of a large Bible hitting his head. Stunned and confused, David didn't resist as he was pulled down from the wagon. He barely noticed his hands being tied behind his back. He stumbled along past those who were carving up the dead horse and was led to an old parking lot behind the town hall. His wits began to return as he crossed the crumbling asphalt. He realized that the crowd was now rhythmically chanting, "Remember, remember the 6th of December, Santa's a treasonous plot." David shook his head in confusion. The chant was wrong. It should be November. And where was the gunpowder? He felt himself being tied to a post. Then he noticed that each person in the crowd placed a piece of wood at his feet. As the pile grew higher, he observed that each piece was neatly tied with a red ribbon. David tried to say something, but his miserable beard was tied into his mouth as a gag. He looked around desperately and found Van Erp still in his minister's garb. Something was wrong with that attire too. The pair of white tabs representing the tablets of the 10 Commandments were too large, more like the kind worn by lawyers than preachers. The collar was wrong too. Instead of the back closing collar of the clergy, Van Erp was wearing a front closing collar. He wasn't dressed as a 19th century minister. Van Erp was dressed as a 19th century judge. He began to speak, and the chanting crowd grew silent. The scriptures tell us that we must put away our sin and purge our nation of evil. The scriptures tell us that a man who has sinned greatly should have his body delivered to Satan, that his soul may be saved, though tested by fire. Santa Claus once led a whole world to sin and destruction. We repudiate him and all his works, and he shall wear the sign of his sin as a reminder to us never to follow him. At these words, Bill Smith came forward. He was smiling broadly, as always, but his eyes were too intense to be reassuring. David saw that he was carrying the infamous voice recorder, neatly tied with a long loop of red ribbon. Bill reached up and hung the loop around David's neck, so the recorder hung at the center of David's chest. As he did this, he whispered, "Thanks, David. You're the best Santa we've had in a long time." Then he stepped back. The judge stepped forward. Someone had given him a burning torch, which he held in his left hand. The large Bible was in his right. Van Earp's voice boomed, "Thus do we purify ourselves." He cast the torch onto the pile of wood. The celebration began as Santa burned. That's the end.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great. Up next is Frederick Melancon. Frederick Charles Melancon is a native of New Orleans, but he currently lives in Mississippi with his wife and daughter. He's often surprised how every river reminds him of the Mississippi River, and it doesn't matter how far he is from home. Take it away, Frederick.
All right, thank you. I'm reading from a short excerpt of one of my stories in Futuristic Canada. Protecting artifacts in Heaves Chasma. The Martians took the three scientists' clothes and threw them in a ventilated tent on the far side of the dig site. The decaying atmosphere of the previously terraformed planet would prevent the Earthlings from escaping. At least, that is what the Martians thought. Marie shouldn't call the inhabitants Martians. After all, they were still human beings. While the term described the descendants of the first Mars colonists, it was derogatory and only used in movies. However, in the last 10 minutes, she'd been called Earthling too many times to acknowledge them as Heavers, their chosen name. While Marie loved movies, she didn't want to be involved in anything that could potentially turn into one. Discovering old science fiction films in the Kroner Library on the University of British Columbia's campus was what started her interest in archaeology, back when she was a high school student at U-Hill. While sneaking into the university library from her school had taught her how to talk her way out of a lot of situations, those experiences never included placating a bunch of Martians who thought their precious heritage, mostly broken plastic kitchenware and various squishy toy animals, was being hijacked by outsiders. Just yesterday, her husband, Vic, now over in the corner entwined with his former grad student turned fiancé, had tapped pictures of the museum in Vancouver where the Martians' treasures would be exhibited. Even the videos, he'd said. Her ex didn't care about all the old science fiction flicks. He dismissed her research saying, "Life isn't a movie. No one lives in one." In his opinion, a discarded spoon told him more about a past culture than Marie's films. Anyway, he always thought her videos were too loud. Vic liked to play a game when they lived together in grad school. Whenever she replayed her favorite movie, he'd hit her screen's power button before the black-clad villain said that he was the hero's father. On their final night together, Vic deleted every one of her digital films with her attached notes. When she tried to retrieve her movies, the dark screen could only show her tear-streaked face. Even to Vic, the videos in Heaves Chasma were different. On an encrypted stick of black machinery, information, pictures, and even personal footage from the original settlers could be accessed. The home movies were the only reason Marie agreed to go on this expedition. The find would make her a star, at least in her field. But now, the three of them didn't even have their clothing because Vic accidentally let slip that everything was being transported to a museum in Canada. He didn't bother telling the Martians it was a temporary exhibit or that all would be returned. But this kind of thinking wasn't helping. As she pressed her goosebumped arms against her bare chest, she kept looking over at her ex and his grad student. Even in the small area of the pressurized tent, she sat so that no part of her could touch the entwined couple. Vic stared right at her. The Martians thought taking their clothes would keep the Earthlings contained while they liberated the artifacts. But they were wrong. She had to escape. The oxygen-deficient atmosphere outside the tent and the gritty dust that covered every inch of her body wasn't as uncomfortable as her ex's gaze and his upturned lips. The three of them didn't need the oxygen masks if they were quick. with long periods of unassisted breathing, though while long periods of unassisted breathing were dangerous, there was still enough oxygen in the air to steal a transport. Vic had scattered transports around the site. The vehicles looked like giant popcorn cartons that moviegoers once sold. Marie worried the cartons would destroy unearthed artifacts, but Vic feared damaging one of his precious finds with a long walk. The Martians didn't have the numbers to watch all the vehicles, and they hadn't even left a guard at the tent. To them, the proper Earthlings couldn't handle the oxygen-deficient atmosphere or the embarrassment of being seen out of costume. I'm going for the memory files, Vic said. Leave it to Vic to steal the spotlight. No, you're not, Marie said. Still nude, Vic and Marie circled the site to get the files. She wasn't about to let Vic mess this up for all of them. Meanwhile, the grad student kicked up puffs of sand running to the transports. Her father had been some kind of mechanic. The locals were at the faded yellow arches the machines unearthed the other day. If Vic and Marie stayed away from that area, they would go unnoticed. Vic still left a wide depression in the sand as he crawled on his belly to escape detection. Under a canopy with 2 overturned tables, a Martian girl stared at a screen playing a movie from the old times. Using a wire from her suit spinner, she figured out how to access the files. It had taken Marie weeks to learn how to do that. The movie was an old Earth cartoon. In the desert of apocalyptic Earth, there was a girl flying on a walker-like glider while being chased by a massive roly-poly. Vic threw the girl off the chair and then tried to rip the wire out of the side of her screen. Sand lodged in the corners of the girl's monitor. The Martian kid grabbed Vic's leg. Hopping on one foot, he tried to pry the little girl off, and leaning too far forward, he fell on the monitor. The screen cracked, and the memory stick shattered into the pieces just as the animated main character from the movie was about to calm the giant insect. The Martian girl scrambled to her device and cradled it in her arms. A tear rolled out from behind her mask and reflected in the broken black screen. Marie kicked Vic as hard as she could. He fell into her and they both landed on a table, pulling a canvas over them. They struggled to get out, and when they did, the other Martians, alerted by the noise, puffed through their breathing tubes as the 2 sand-speckled bodies emerged. Clearly, the Earthlings' makeout scene had ended. The grad student wasn't in the tent when the Martians threw the 2 of them back in. Why, Vic asked. Marie sat in the corner. In the movie, the girl saved her people and the roly-polies. Back when Marie was a grad student, the first paper she presented at a conference dissected the influence of that film. The paper was one of the files Vic deleted when he left her. Marie couldn't undelete her work, just as the little girl couldn't reconstruct the movie. But this time, Vic's actions weren't going unpunished. And in this drama's post-credit scene, Marie promised to send the little Heber the movie. And that is that. Thank you all.
Thank you, Frederick. Up next is Melissa SMOL. Melissa is a mother of 2 boys, and her husband also shares all her nerdy hobbies. She has published several short stories in the books The Way Through and Still by Polar Expressions Publishing, the story Poutine, Bugs, and Big Bessie in Futuristic Canada by Dark Helix Press, and several short stories in World of Myth magazine. She's currently working on a YA Dragon book series. Go ahead, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be reading from Poutine, Bugs, and Big Bessie. So, Planet Axon, Toronto Colony, year 2168. Large stone pillars circled the city spaceport. It was made of red and stone structures and silhouetted on the edge of a huge desert planet, out in the far reaches of the galaxy known as Axon. Here on the planet Axon was where humanity met the Dridorian, also known as Derps, a race of crystallized humanoids. Crystals covered the majority of their body and grew out of their skulls like giant sets of crystallized antlers. The large antlers, the more important the derp. Similar to humans, derps also had different types of skin and crystal tones, the 4 main colors being brown, gray, blue, and green. Together, the two species, human and derp, formed the Toronto Colony, a small but important mining settlement. Redtanium was the colony's main export and vital component in the manufacturing of spaceship hulls. One of the biggest troubles the mining operation faced on Axon were the bugs, which had been originally arrived on Axon with the human settlers. Back on Earth, these insects were harmless, but not on Axon. No one knew how they grew so fast or why they became so violent, but the bugs had somehow increased the size of Earth insects reaching the lengths of 4 feet and larger. They buried into the food stores and some even taken to eating colonists. A department within the sanitation section was formed, specializing around hunting bugs and protecting the colony. The job of a sanitation worker involved monitoring the tunnels under the city and exterminating bugs on site. Vanessa and her partner Nerp were among the finest exterminators on Axon. For years, the bugs had been burrowing under the city, their usual exit points, typically located by food, refineries, recycling plants, and waste reclamation plants. However, sometimes they popped in unexpected places. "We found one," Nerp said, as he ran up beside his partner, Vanessa, holding 2 small laser guns in his hands. "I should have brought Big Bessie with me." "Small bugs," the boss said, "a handful of small bugs. Does he even know what small is?" Crouching, Vanessa put her shoulder up against Nerp's huge blue crystal legs. Nerp, 8 feet tall, with big moose antlers, easily dwarfed the blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. Not his fault. He only has the info from the civilians. "And next time we hunt, you get to be the bait." I know, I lost my spot, sorry. She scowled. "You know ladybugs don't like dirt," Nerp replied. "My crystal shell is too tough for their—" "Watch out," Vanessa yelled as a beetle sailed over them and into the red tunnel walls. "Pay attention. These Japanese beetles are either getting faster or we are getting slower." "Are you calling me old?" Nerp reached out and squashed his hand down on a 3-foot-long orange ladybug. "I really want that big one. It could be awesome on a poutine sandwich." Nerp raised his rifle to take another shot at the largest of the ladybugs, which towered a good 1.5 feet over the others. Vanessa glared at Nerp. "Not another queen. Last time you ate one, it gave you heartburn for a week, and I'm not clocking out more shifts to go and get you meds." She sighed and smiled at Nerp. "Just promise you won't gut it again in the apartment. I still can't get the smell out of the carpet from the last time." "I can't promise you that, Snow Princess." He gave her a big toothy grin. "Let's get this cocky-mated bug." He jumped up and charged down the tunnel towards the queen bug, ignoring the smaller ones. "Stop calling me Snow Princess," Vanessa mumbled. Nerp had many pet names for Vanessa, Snow Princess being the one she hated the most. Working underground the last couple of years made her pale, and she waited a moment and then charged down the tunnel after her life partner, shooting bugs as she went. And that's there.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Up next, and our last reader is Chloe Gilholy. Chloe lives and works in Oxfordshire. She's always hoping to get big ideas from her next holiday. Go ahead, Chloe.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm reading today an excerpt of my dystopian sci-fi novel, Game of Mass Destruction. It's about Yuzuko, who his family owns a robot welfare company, but she has to go on a reality show where she has to destroy robots. So I'm going to read chapter 8 today. Part 10-2, the rules. The next time Yuzuko woke up, she was in a padded cell with everybody, excluding Lisa and the bus driver. She hovered around, looking at the fear-stricken faces and stuttering bodies. Lavender's fruity perfume threw her off. Screams were lost with the orchestra in the background. She saw that Bobby struck close to Todd, appearing more at ease by somebody he knew and trusted. Yuzuko wrapped her arms around Sakura. "It's happening." "What are we going to do?" Sakura squealed. "Should we have warned them?" It was a question Yuzuko couldn't answer. "Calm down, everybody," Todd said, with his hands in the air. "I'm sure this is all one big publicity stunt." "No, it isn't," Lavender, the American girl, cried out, slapping the bars. Her purple fringe flew around her face. "We've been locked up like criminals." Her eyes welled up as she threw herself into her boyfriend's arms. We've done nothing wrong. Izuko's heart pounded. Her shoulders tensed up as she caught a glimpse of Lavender's smeared makeup. Even stressed and angry, Izuko still wanted to idolize her as she did at school. Lavender's YouTube videos used to make her feel beautiful. She imploded on the floor by the weight of the others before Bobby and Todd lifted her by each arm. Pieter from the Netherlands rummaged through his pockets. Where's my passport? Where's my phone? Somebody's taken it. He charged at Todd and tightened his fists around his throat. Was it you? No, get off me. They had divided themselves into two parts of the cell, one pulling Pieter away and the other pulling Todd away, as both men were built. It was a challenge. Izuko stood between them, trying to help both sides. Stop, she ordered, throwing her arms either side, watching Sukjo's nose. Fighting each other won't get us anywhere. Hi, guys. Lisa waved at them outside their cell. The similarities to the former pop star Sia Bucks were so uncanny. Izuko suspected she could be the real thing. The woman appeared to be trying to recapture her golden teenage days with the skimpy latex and purple afro. Sakura collapsed onto her when Lisa took the key out and unlocked the door. Lisa smiled, silver lipstick glistening under the light. She was a spitting image of Sia Bucks. Is that you, Lisa? Hendrik, a friend of Pieter, asked. Of course it is. Pieter gasped. Blimey, you look so different and stunning. He leaned over to Hendrik and whispered, I wouldn't mind. Hendrik chuckled. Me neither. Honestly, is sex all I think about nowadays? Izuko thought. Would you all like to come with me, please? Lisa said. They all did as they were told. Lisa led them to a golden corridor with black roses decorated on the banisters. Every couple of meters, there were portraits of broken robots. Izuko spotted the cameras and TV cues lurking in dark corners. Lisa brought them all into a deserted boardroom with 4 black walls, 21 chairs and a round table. The seats had already been allocated with name tags. The chandelier above them, dripping with pearls, gave life to the room. Izuko listened to the chatting around her. Most of them spoke in her own language. As Izuko was fluent in English, she could understand Bobby and Todd. If I had a penny for every camera I've spotted, I'd be loaded, Bobby said to Todd. You'd have to be rich to have diamonds on the banister. Makes my old man look like a pauper. Still, it's got to be this big house. Yes. Izuko gritted her teeth, calling this. So obvious she is. She only wished it wasn't sarcasm. Good evening, everybody, Lisa said with a smile, leaning over to the table. You're all here because you have been chosen to take part in the holiday of a lifetime. And the holiday of the lifetime is happening right now. Sorry, Todd raised his hand. This looks more like a classroom than a holiday. I understand. It's been a long journey. You're all tired and confused. That's why I thought we could all sit down and relax for a little while. She dropped her British accent, and then came the high-pitched American accent that made her famous. I tricked you all good, didn't I? Chuckling with laughter, she curtsied as the lights turned off. I am Sia Bucks. On behalf of the whole world, congratulations. All of you are the chosen contestants for this year's Games of Mass Destruction. And I think I'll stop there because I think my 6 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you, Chloe, and thanks to all the readers we had today. Big round of virtual applause to everyone. We're going to move into the question and answer period now. We have about 18 minutes, and the first question is for everyone. What inspired your story? And let's start with Jen, since she was the first reader.
Sure. I wanted to do something about So I wanted to do something about Canada and US relations because especially at the time I wrote it, we were deep in the Trump years, and I could see a military future for Canada and the United States, and I imagined that we wouldn't nearly be as good at war as they are. And I also, I remember when Baryshnikov and other famous Russians were defecting from the Soviet Union, and so I kind of melded those two things together. And also just the whole notion that we always want people to acclimatize or change themselves to be part of our society, or we want nobody to change to be part of our society. So I kind of wanted to explore the thought process that goes into what it's like when you're the one facing that choice. And I also wanted to like do the voice of somebody who wasn't necessarily all that great a person, because that's always fun.
Helen, what about you?
Sure. So my inspiration for the story, well, the main character is a librarian and I'm a librarian, and I was excited to kind of combine my two passions, librarianship and environmentalism. So I was imagining what the world would look like in 150 years after Canada 150. So what would it look like if climate change continued to progress, and like how would Canada react? So it's a bit of a satire on that. And I was kind of poking a lot of fun at Canadian tropes and stuff like that. I think my main inspiration was basically having that chance to find where librarianship and environmentalism could intersect, which was fun. Oh.
Okay, let's go to Andrew. What inspired your story?
Thanks. I wrote this back in the early 90s, and I had not been out of seminary that many years. I grew up in the outskirts of Montreal, and I had landed my first charge in a very little collection of towns in Ontario, and I was suffering a bit of culture shock, I guess. And I learned a lot from those places, and I really liked the people, but I just wanted to imagine what it would be like in a rather different world, where the grumblings from the more evangelical side of Christianity about things like Santa Claus at Christmas were actually put to the test. And global warming was such a big thing. Now we call it climate change, but at the time it was global warming. And I could imagine it really wrecking the world that we had. Today we've had snowmobiles going by in the street, but I was imagining a place where snow never happened. And all of this sort of came together in my mind about a church taking over a town and living in a really strict, really old-fashioned way and reacting to the super materialism and the damage that the world had suffered as a result. So that's where it came from.
Mm-hmm. Frederick, how about you?
Mine was actually a long work in progress, and probably a good story about how if you are a writer, like, don't give up. Because really I was sort of inspired as a teenager from this news story where essentially a dig site in Latin America had a similar thing happen to them, and went through multiple drafts and left it alone, but the idea just kept popping in my head. And then when I saw the call for Futuristic Canada, I thought that might work there in that setting, and gave it another try. Unfortunately, it was picked up.
Melissa?
Mine was mostly inspired by 1920s old sci-fi, like the old sci-fi stories that we grew up as a kid. So I wanted to write something that, so I love the old sci-fi and all that. So that's where mine was. And the Big Bessie is one of our guns from our 501st group. So it's one of the rifles. So that's where mine came from.
And lastly, Chloe.
Yeah, I think the big main inspirations for Game of Mass Destruction for me was the Battle Royale by Koshin Takami and the Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. They're both quite similar, but I think Hunger Games is more popular. I think they're both very great books because there's a lot of action and a lot of the strong dystopian themes and the dark sci-fi, and all the characters are very strong and powerful, and it made me want to write something as powerful like that.
Okay, let's do another roundtable question for everyone. Can you guys talk about your next projects, starting with Jen?
Okay. I've been on a lot of hiatus lately. I expect that a lot of you are in the same position as me, and COVID was kind of tough on my creative spirit. But I am working on a series of short scenes for a woman who directs for film, and she's doing a director's workshop for teaching directors how to deal with intimacy and violence. So, you know, how to coach the actors without them being uncomfortable and things like that. And I'm also hopefully working on the same project I've been working on for years now, which is a feature film version of Undead Redhead, my book about a vegan zombie.
Helen?
Yeah, so my project I'm mostly working on right now is my novel, The Ghosts of Thorwald Place, and it's actually going to be coming out in October, and I'm really excited. Just doing the very, very final round of edits before I submit it, and so that's kind of been my focus lately. But I'm also working on my second novel, but I'm kind of almost finished it, and I'm just doing some edits, and then I'm gonna see if my publisher is interested in that. So basically that's what I'm up to right now.
Okay, let's hear from Andrew.
Well, I just had a story come out in the quarterly magazine, The Fifth Die, and I'm quite pleased with that, but it's not all that new. I wrote it a little while ago. Frankly, as a minister, this COVID year has been really hard, and I do a lot of my writing when I get a break, and I haven't had much of a break, so I don't have any projects at the moment. I was supposed to get a sabbatical this year, and I was expecting to do some writing. I've had to postpone it because of COVID, so maybe next year I can sit down and get some writing done, but nothing at the moment, sorry to say.
All right, Frederick?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't mean to plagiarize anybody, right? But yeah, you know, COVID has sort of been a big thing. I am a teacher, so trying to adapt to a new digital world, you know, while also trying to help students be successful has sort of really taken the majority of my time. What I've primarily been actually working on is poetry, of which really just small, like micro things. Like just recently I had something come out in the Haiku Journal. So just little bits of imagery and whatever that I can sort of squeeze out of my time, you know, working with students. You know, I hope to get back on the horse as far as all that goes, and I do have some ideas, but yeah, mostly, as I said, unfortunately due to COVID, it's just a time crunch, and then having, I don't know, the emotional space to then sit and you know, find some time to write other than just to maybe breathe sometimes. So yeah, that's sort of where I am with that.
Melissa?
I've been really busy. I wrote in November 2 novels during Namarama, so I've just been doing all the edits for them. They're my Dragon series, so I'm working on the first book, trying to finish all my edits for that, so I can have it ready by October, November is what we're hoping for. And then the other two will follow after. And then World of Myth magazine, I have Getting the Shot that was from last month, and then the second part to Getting the Shot is coming out this month. So Getting a Shot is about he's a hitman that gets hired to vaccinate people, basically. So that's what the Getting the Shot's all about. And that's what I've been up to.
And let's hear from Chloe.
COVID did take up a lot of my inspiration, although I didn't write as much as I normally do last year. But last month I released a short about a prince who doesn't want to get married, but his dad wants him to, so he decides to make this contest up and makes it ridiculously hard so he doesn't have to get married.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? We'll give it like 10, 15 seconds. Okay, then I just want to thank everybody for taking part in this.
I have a question. Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question for Jen Frankel. Okay, my question is, if you could be a cake, what kind of cake would you be?
Okay, this is unfair. I've changed my mind since the last time I was asked this question. Believe it or not, it comes up quite a bit. I would be an almond dacquoise cake.
Mm.
Yeah, but I wouldn't
That's
share
awesome.
myself with others because some people would be allergic to me.
Oh, that's fair. That's hot. I approve.
Carrot cake.
Oh, nice.
Ooh, that is the second most common answer, actually.
Nutty.
Okay, any more questions? All right, thanks again, everyone. There's another event after this, next panel about unendorsed Trump stories. So stay on and check that out. If not, and stay safe and take care. Have a good rest of your days.